Hey, what's up? The Cabinet Vision guy here with another video podcast. So, today I want to go over preferences. Preferences can provide a simple way for us to change some basic functionality of Cabinet Vision. Let's start it off by clicking on the App button, and then clicking on the Preferences button. Now these are the system preferences. They hold a global list of preferences that will control how each job will work. The nice thing is, several of these can be changed at the job level. Not all of them, mind you, but some of them. I want to also note that these are local system preferences. If you're using the network version of Cabinet Vision, then setting these here won't set them on all computers across the board. We'll go over how to get that done later on. Anyways, when we open these system preferences, we get the User tab first. This is information that we can use in the job for auto text to be filled out in areas like CAD and the bid reports that we create. The various fields should be filled out with the proper information. The company name should be your company name. The first two lines of the address should be any of your address information, as well as your city, state code, and postal code. I will say this. If you aren't using a version of Cabinet Vision that is localized for the United States of America, this tab may look different. Unfortunately, I don't have any copies of Cabinet Vision localized in any other languages to say that this is a fact, so I can only show what's listed for the USA. The contact field should be filled out with information about the point of contact for your company. The person that any questions about jobs, pricing, etc. should be, well, contacted about. Their phone, email, mobile, and fax numbers should be the same for that person. The comments box is a general area for you to put any special comments that you want auto-filled. I can't think of anything you'd want to put there, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Now, it would be safe to say that you would want all of the information to be correct. Let's say, however, that you don't want to fill this in. You don't have to. Instead, you could fill this in with whatever information that you want, and just use the CAD and bid reports autofill text to fill in with some other information. It's always a nice thing to have these autofills, so keep in mind that you can really use these for anything you want. I do recommend using it for what it's supposed to be, however, because if you call out the company name autofill and it puts some weird text in, you might be scratching your head for a while trying to figure out why. Now we can move on to the Modules tab. You may or may not even have this tab. Its presence is based on what your authorization code allows. In fact, that really holds true for the majority of the tabs you'll find here. Keep in mind that I have all the bells and whistles when it comes to Cabinet Vision. So if it doesn't show up for you and you really want it, you need to contact customer service about getting a new code. So with that said, you can see that I have a path that I can set for JobSite Companion's briefcase. This is where I can import and export items for JobSite Companion in Cabinet Vision. I'm not really going to get into what this is or how it works, so just know that's where it is. Next, we have the Measurements Units tab. This is a great tab. It allows us to define how the system will handle units. The Unit box allows us to specify whether we want to use inches or millimeters. Once we have that decided, we can then specify the precision for imperial and metric units. Setting the precision here is basically setting the default precision. At any time we can change this, but when we go from one unit type to another, this is what Cabinet Vision will default to. Next to each precision box, we find a symbol text box. These are relatively new to Cabinet Vision. I think they only added them a few versions ago. I can't really remember when. Anyways, by default, they use the industry standard text representations for inches and millimeters. We can change this to whatever we want though. I could write out inches, and I could write out millimeters, or I can change it to whatever I need it to be. The text that is filled in here will not only be shown in my dimensions, but it will also be used for autofill text. Finally, we have the Allow Unit Switch on Status Bar option. Turning this off allows us to disallow us to change the unit type without changing the system preferences. We will still have the ability to change the precision, however, just not the type. Moving right along, we get to the General tab. We can set some options here that can have an impact on performance, so this can be an important one. We see that our first option allows us to set the size of our undo-redo stack. By default, it's set to 5. This means that Cabinet Vision will allow you to undo or redo the last 5 actions that you've taken. We can specify a range of 0 to 12 for the stack. Setting it higher will give us a larger stack to work with, but it can also take up memory space. Setting it to 0 will disable the undo redo stack, freeing up memory, but we have to be more careful with our actions in Cabinet Vision. Our next option is to set the time in minutes between each autosave action. Again, I'm using defaults, so for every 20 minutes of work I perform, Cabinet Vision will create an autosave file, overriding any older ones, with whatever my new information is. This is a precautionary setting. Should anything go wrong, like the computer breaks, the power goes out, or whatever, I should only lose 20 minutes worth of work. Now, on those larger jobs that we create, this can be a big hit on performance, as Cabinet Vision will stop whatever is going on to make sure that a backup is created. Setting it lower will lessen the amount of work you lose, but may also cause your work to take a while longer to make, since you have to wait for the autosave to complete. You can disable it, which I don't ever recommend, because if something happens and you didn't save, there goes the whole day, and another as you spend it recreating your work. Before I say anything further, let me clarify something about big jobs. I'm not talking about multi-room jobs with nothing but cabinets in them. No, I'm talking about the extremely detailed engineering data that has custom 3D models added in with some custom construction methods, UCSs, and stuff that just takes a long time to set perfectly. Okay, so we can also show the number of recent jobs showing when we click on the app button. This has little to no effect on the performance. It's just, well, a preference. I covered saved drawing scenes in separate file in a previous video, but I will go over it briefly again. This option allows you to take any drawing information, like when we send to drawings, from one of the viewports, and store it in a totally separate file next to our job file. This can help with the overall job file size as well as the speed at which a job will open. Saving the last open saved job path allows us to tell Cabinet Vision that when I open or save a job, I want it to hold on to that path. When I go to open a job or save a job again, it will open back up to that folder. Finally, we have the create a backup copy when opening a job. This will make Cabinet Vision create a backup copy of our job while it's opening it for us to use. This can really help us when we do something to the job and accidentally save the changes when we weren't supposed to. I can then just go grab the backup file and get right back to what was working for me before I did that mistake. Next up is the Message Log Options tab. I'm not going to get into the meaning of every option here, rather I just want you to know where you can turn them on and off. I will let you know about this option down here though. This allows us to specify the number of seconds that a notification will be displayed. The default is 3 seconds, but if that's too quick for you to read it, you can always set it to a higher value. Okay, let's move on to the Auto Plan tab. Here we have all the options that Cabinet Vision will use when you autofill a room with cabinets. The Fill Properties group allows us to define the maximum cabinet width that we will allow, as well as a nominal or average cabinet width that we want. We can even specify a unit value for any modular increments that we want to allow. The Shelves group allows us to define what type of shelves we want, either adjustable or standard shelves, as well as the number of shelves we want to be auto-populated into any upper assemblies. You should know what an adjustable shelf is, but just in case you aren't sure what is meant by a standard shelf, it's the shelf type that is defined as a shelf in the assembly wizard as well as in the section editor. We're also given the option to automatically combine any upper assemblies into one big assembly. Finally, we can set this as a system default, which will make these settings remain the same when we close and reopen Cabinet Vision. Next, I want to cover AutoConstraints. If you've watched my older videos, including the one about my trip to Las Vegas, you know what constraints are, or at least you should have an idea about them. For those that don't, constraints are a series of logical values that are placed on CAD elements to create defined shapes in Cabinet Vision. We use them for shaping in Cabinet Vision Ultimate. The AutoConstraints allow you to define what constraints Cabinet Vision will place on CAD elements as you create the elements. This can be extremely helpful to automate our shapes, so that we don't have to do it manually. Now, we can turn off the AutoConstraints by unchecking the Generate Constraints Automatically option. We can also specify the constraints we want to be automatically created. If you want to know more about what these constraints do and how they work, please take a moment to take a look at your help files for more information. I will let you know, though, that Cabinet Vision will do its best to make sure that the constraints will only be created when they are valid. For instance, the x-axis constraint constrains horizontal lines along the x-axis of the shape, which means that it won't apply that constraint to any vertical lines. It would use the y-axis constraint for that instead. Once again, I'm using out-of-the-box defaults, so Cabinet Vision is only constraining elements that are tangent to one another. Now we can move on to the spell checking tab. This tab allows us to set up how we want Cabinet Vision to handle the spell checker for when we're typing in text. The dictionary is where Cabinet Vision will find all the words to check against. I only have the English-US dictionary since I'm in the US. Your dictionary will be dependent on what country you're in. The spelling group gives us a series of options to define how Cabinet Vision will work and how to handle certain words. Check spelling as you type allows Cabinet Vision to, well, check your spelling as you type it in. This holds a minimal performance hit, so it's not too big of a deal. If you uncheck this, when you pause typing for a specific amount of time, spell checking will then occur. Suggest from main dictionaries only means that if you have any custom dictionaries defined, Cabinet Vision will ignore them. If you don't know what a custom dictionary is, then you probably don't have one. The next three options allow us to specify a set of word types to ignore. We can ignore words that are all uppercase, words that have numbers in them, and internet and file addresses. Internet and file addresses would include items like http://www.cabinetvision.com and c:/planet/solid_8_0. The autocorrect group allows us to define how Cabinet Vision will autocorrect words. The two initial capitals allow Cabinet Vision to correct words that have the first two letters capitalized, for when we accidentally held the Shift key down for that 1 millisecond too long. We can also have Cabinet Vision capitalize the first letter of any sentence, and if we have Caps Lock's key on, we can autocorrect for that too. Replacing text as we type will allow Cabinet Vision to specify that, even while we're typing, go ahead and replace out the words that need to be replaced. Finally, we have the Advanced button. This gives you a way to create a list of words that you commonly misspell and replace them with the correct ones. The Layout tab is a big one. It's filled to the brim with options. These options allow us to define general layout functionality that we want Cabinet Vision to use. I'll start with the Clearances group. Reefer side clearance allows us to define the measurement that should be between a refrigerator and another cabinet object. Floor to upper above reefer defines the distance from the top of the floor to the bottom of an upper cabinet when it's placed above a refrigerator. Sink to sink opening is the number of units on each side of a sink to make it fit. If this is set to a value other than 0, you will be prompted whether or not you want to resection a cabinet to make it fit the sink in place. Floor to upper above range is the distance from the top of the floor to the bottom of an upper assembly when placed above a range object. Window clearance is the distance that a cabinet will automatically be placed beside a window. End of wall clearance is the distance that a cabinet will automatically be placed away from a wall. Door clearance is the distance that a cabinet will automatically be placed away from a door. I think you can see a pattern here. End wall clearance is, of course, the distance that a cabinet will automatically be placed away from a wall that is an end wall type. The next group, Combined Toes, holds one property: assembly depth tolerance. This allows us to define a measurement tolerance that can be used for combining toe bases. As a default, Cabinet Vision will not combine any toe bases together if there is a difference in depth of more than 2 inches, or 50.8 millimeters. Next, we have the unfinished end tolerance. This group allows us to define the distances from both other assemblies and walls that we want Cabinet Vision to use to determine whether an end should be unfinished or finished. The edit group allows some cool things. A while back, the developers introduced a feature that allowed us to edit the sectioning of a cabinet from the wall elevation viewport directly. Some people didn't like this, so then they gave us a switch to enable that feature. By default, Cabinet Vision will just enter the assembly like it used to, but if you want to edit it from the wall, we can set it to do that here. This group also allows us to define some other important functions, like adjust assemblies on appliance move. This means that when we move an appliance, any neighboring cabinets will be resized to make sure everything fits properly. The ignore wall ends in elevation view is just something that allows us to skip over walls with the wall end type. making it easier to navigate through the walls. Finally, we get the center appliance under Windows, which does exactly what it says, kind of. With this check, Cabinet Vision will give you the option to center any sinks or cooktops underneath a window when you place them. Now we can move to the doors group. This one can cause a lot of headaches for a lot of people. Here we can define a minimum size for our doors. Put the smallest size that you ever want your doors to be in this box. By default it's 3, but if you feel comfortable making a 2-inch wide door, then set it so. On the other hand, if you need at least 4-inch wide doors, then make sure it's set there properly. If the door doesn't meet the minimum size requirements set here, Cabinet Vision will not create the door. Next we have the maximum size property. This property defines the maximum size that a door should be before Cabinet Vision attempts to split that opening to add more doors. More doors. Like Mordor from Lord of the Rings, you know.
One does not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep.
Anyways, we get to the last option. Use pair doors. This is for face frame construction. If we have this set, when we add doors to a face frame cabinet, a pair of doors will be made with no stile between them. If it's off, it will split the section and add a mid-stile. Now we move over to the Geometry tab. This tab has some very important options on it, like hide unmatched master operations. It's obvious what this does, but what is a master operation? It's a special type of operation in Cabinet Vision that you can add to a part. When that part is a specific distance away from another part, Cabinet Vision will place a slave operation on that part. An example of this would be line bore operations. You would put the master operation on an adjustable shelf. Then, when the shelf is a predefined distance away from an end, the line bore holes will show up on the end. If we check this, it will remove from the view any operations that aren't connected properly. So if the line bore, in the early example, isn't being placed on the end, it won't clog up the view with an operation that doesn't work. Next, we have the include banding and overall part size. This will subtract the edge banding thickness from all parts. There could be many reasons that you need this for. One that I see a lot of is for parts that need to have pre-milling on edge banders. Incorporate door assembly operations on slab door part for CNC. We'll add any door operations like pull holes and hinge holes on our slab parts. We would uncheck this if we had something like a Bloom mini press that we wanted to use to put our hinge drilling on. Finally, we have the output buyout doors for CNC. This one is here in case we don't make our doors. We used to buy our doors from Waltzcraft, but we still needed to have the CNC operations for the pull holes and hinge cup holes. With this checked, we won't get the parts made for the door, but we will get the secondary CNC files to cut out the necessary operations. Last but not least, we have the Fill Objects tab. This is where you would go to set up the default autofill information for the objects that will be placed. I'm not going to cover all of these options because there's a whole lot of them to cover. Perhaps in a different podcast, however. Anyways, that does it for preferences. Well, not quite. There are actually 4 more tabs that I want to show you. They aren't in the system preferences, however. To get to them, we first need to close this window. Then we need to open up a new job. Finally, we can go to the App button and click on the Preferences tab. You should notice 4 new tabs: Detail, Format, Tools, and Printing. As you can see, they're only available from inside a job. So let's get started on checking these out. We'll start with the Detail tab. What we get to do here is set the detail resolution for the available views. The 3 options we have for each is low, medium, and high. A low resolution will give you a slight performance increase as it will make Cabinet Vision favor performance over detail in your views. Medium gives you a mid-range, having a good balance between performance and detail. High is all about the detail though. Cabinet Vision does whatever it can to make sure that you get the most detail in the view. One note, when you mess around with these settings, you may lose certain things on lower resolution. For instance, you won't see any glass that are on doors or shelves if you aren't on the highest setting only. Next we have the Format tab. This allows us to select how certain text is formatted in Cabinet Vision. The date and time formats are options that we can select from one of a pre-made list of formats to use. The dimension format is as well, but let me show you something cool. If I click on the ellipsis button, I get the ability to define my own custom dimension values. We can create new formats that will be added to the list for us to select from, or I can edit the current ones. You can see the text below that is highlighted that allows me to specify whatever text I want listed. You should notice that this is auto text, just like in the CAD sections of Cabinet Vision. I won't go over all the auto text values you can use, so if you want to know what they all are, just go to the help files and check them out. Just two left, the next one being the Tools tab. I can't really explain what's all on this tab in a generalized sort of way, so I'll just start going over the groups. The Smart Lines group starts off with an enable box. Checked means that the smart lines are enabled, unchecked means they're disabled. What are snap lines? Well, they're the lines that Cabinet Vision will use to snap your drawing elements to. The angle is, well, the angle that you want to snap to. The tolerance is how much you want Cabinet Vision to secure the snapping. For instance, if we have an angle of 45 degrees with a high tolerance, Cabinet Vision will snap along 45-degree increments only. Changing the tolerance to a lower value will allow you to have a more freehand drawing experience. Next up is the Snap Lines group. Snap lines are the lines that show up when you are drawing something, like a wall, and a dotted line appears letting you know that you are aligned with another element's point. You can control the color, and even change whether or not the line is a solid line. The Snapping Options group allows you to control the snap hotkeys as well as which hot points are on for dynamic snapping. I'm not going to go over these, but you can definitely learn more about these in the help file. The Shortcut Keys group allows you to define what keyboard keys you can use for panning around in Cabinet Vision, as well as what keyboard key will refresh the screen. Finally, we have the Zoom mode. This allows you to control how Cabinet Vision will zoom in on items. When we use the Zoom tool, by default, the tool uses the corner method. This means that when we click our mouse, we drag out a rectangle from a corner point to another corner point to define the zoom window. If we set it to center, as we draw out the rectangle, it will be expanded around a center point. We can also specify the zoom factor, which is how much the window will zoom. And finally, we have the ability to specify that we want to reverse the zoom direction when we rotate the mouse scroll wheel. This is there for those of us that want a different zoom direction. And the last preference tab is the Printing tab. This tab will control how you print when printing from a view like the floor plan, elevation, 3D, and drawing views. It will not affect how you print reports, so don't worry about that. So the first option that we can see is the select how the design view should be printed. We can either select a rendered print or a screen print. The rendered print will render the view to make sure it looks its best. The screen print will print exactly what you see on the screen. We can see that the screen print has a couple of extra options though. We can either stretch or shrink the view to fit the paper, which will make sure that the entire paper space is filled with the entire view, or we can print the view the same size as the display. The best way for me to describe the difference is this. If I zoom in and want to print only what I've zoomed in on, I need to use the print view the same size as display. Otherwise, Cabinet Vision will give me the whole view. And the last preference of the day is the drawing paper layer. This allows you to control where the drawing paper layer is, or the title block is. If it's set to back, any scenes on it will overlay the title block. If it's set to front, the title block will overlay everything else. Well, that's it for this video. I hope this was informative and helpful. Now before I give out my thanks and leave you with a quote, I want to make sure you all know the great font of knowledge that the help files are. They give you tons of information and I use them all the time when I get stuck on something. Sometimes a quick read of the help files can make a preference or property very easy to understand. So, thanks to Hayfla for their continued support, and here's today's quote.